Okay. Hi, Ravi.
Hi, Supreet.
Okay, great to have you here. We just took the entire group just took a 2-minute break before you joined. We'll just
Sure.
have you. Venkatesh, can you just please pin Ravi and myself?
Yes.
Just one second. I'm also joining from a laptop.
Okay.
Folks, I would request all of you to be back from the break. We have Ravi with us now to address all of you. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for joining in, Ravi. For this, I was telling everybody you're a very hard man to pin down. So we are really happy that you've been able to give us this time. Just to give you first for everybody, Ravi is head of architecture and technology ecosystem at FIDE. You had heard about FIDE earlier when we had talked about what they're doing and in the projects that they have. He's done his Masters of Engineering in Embedded Systems from the Birla Institute of Technology and Science in Pilani, and has a decade of experience working in hardware, middleware, and software domains. He is the driver of Beckon, which, as we were sharing earlier, has been used in ONDC and Namma Yatri, and is being used in different places and is going in different places across the world. And interestingly, I was told by my colleagues that Ravi is also he's very good at violin and very passionate about physics. So that's another interesting side of Ravi. So Ravi, great to have you with us today. I'll also share a little bit, Ravi, about what's this group of people here. So as you had seen, we were doing the C4GT mentoring program. In the mentoring program, we had 103 projects, 104 projects, for which people had given different proposals. We had over 900 people who submitted proposals. There were about 1,500, 1,400 some proposals that came in. And out of those 900 people, there are 103 who were selected for the 2-month mentoring program. Those are the people who are here today, majority of them. And this is a boot camp that's going on starting day 1 today, will go on till Thursday. And then there will be inauguration event on Friday. And then next week, the coding period begins for 2 months. So this is the 103 cohort. So yeah, welcome aboard.
Thanks a lot, Supreet, and it's really I'm really happy to sort of start this great initiative. I mean, it was I think when I first discussed this with Sujit, I think he was like this is exactly what the whole ecosystem needs, right? I think the nurturing, or I would say the inception of the whole idea of DPGs and DPIs must be seeded at a very young stage, right? Before we all get into the typical mainstream the what do you say rut of working and generally contributing to, I mean, basically working for big tech and corporations, etc. I think this is a very important fundamental sort of stage at which the whole mental model of how technology can actually contribute towards the larger good, not just for the benefit of the market, which is also important for innovation, but also I think it's to really achieve scale, right? To really think about just think about how the internet was originally created, right? If just think about what if the internet was created by a single corporation, right? Everything would have, or the entire burden of responsibility and the burden of innovation would have fallen on that one organization or company, and innovation would have really cycled right at that time. So but what happened, the entire academic sector and the research sector, all of them came together and started building these various small DPGs, open source contributions, things like Android and HTTP, and as things like Linux, right? I mean, all of these, I mean, today we can't imagine a world without Linux or Android today, right? At least in the technology ecosystem. So I think it is very important for that mental model to change, that it's not just for me to consume whatever is out there. It's also important for me to give back because it is going to come back tenfold, right? Because there is a larger ecosystem of contributors and believers out there who's also contributing to the same development. You're learning from them. You're learning not just in terms of code or technology, but you're also exposed to a larger culture, right? And learning from them that people think in different ways, right? And it's very important to have that kind of a mental model very early. And yeah, I think that's why I was really happy about this initiative and having the opportunity to actually participate in this. So yeah, thanks a lot. Great job, guys.
Thanks so much, Ravi, and really excited to see so many Beckon projects. I know, I think it was a couple of discussions, but just the sort of just the engagement that you're also having, and then the way you're sort of looking at the community, it's also inspiring for us and for the community, because I think the more projects that come, I think that's also a very good proof point that everybody, both sides, right, are working well towards ensuring that the open source community can participate well, in this entire initiative. So great to have you. In fact, what we thought, Ravi, what we do today is, given all the experience that you have and a lot of the work that you've been doing, it would be great if you can, give this community a perspective on, why you feel DPGs at this point are important and what's the sort of role they're playing in the digital transformation of India. We did talk a little bit about this in this community, but would be great to get your perspective. And also a little bit about your journey of Becknisation of products, right? So I think it's beautiful. And I feel like when you understand it, then you can, start connecting so many dots. It feels so obvious. But like, just if you can just shed some light on that Becknisation and maybe, your examples of Namma Yatri, Pulse Energy, something we heard of as well. Any, success stories that you're seeing there and what's working well. So there's a lot,
Right.
but would just love if you
can. Yeah, I mean, I think I will do my best to sort of, try to fit this entire story in the next, maybe 20-30 minutes. I want to leave the room open for a lot more questions, right? I don't want this to be a monologue. So I think let me just do one thing. Let me just share my screen. I have some content that I would like to present. Awesome. Can you guys see my screen? Is this?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So I think, yeah. And firstly, I think a big thank you for organizing this entire meetup over here, Venkatesh, Supreet, Rahul, etc. And to share sort of like some of my experiences that I have gathered in the last 4 years working with Beckon. For those who don't know me, sorry guys, did somebody say something?
Can you mute? I think there is some noise. Yeah.
Okay. And is it okay if I can probably go off video for a bit? I think there's a little bit of a bandwidth crunch at my end. Is that fine?
Yeah, sure. That's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. So I think for those who don't know me, I think 4 years ago, I had Pramod and Sujit wrote a technology called Beckon Protocol, and through which we also started a larger open source community for building DPGs around Beckon Protocol. So probably it's in the next 30 minutes or so, I will probably share those experiences. So just to give a larger context, right? India, along with other G20 countries, right, have been evangelizing the idea of what you call as the digital public infrastructure, right? DPI in short. It's basically a means to create open, interoperable digital rails on top of which both private and public innovation can thrive, right? And I mean, it's sort of like if you look at the screen right now, if you look at the locomotive, right, the engines that we use for pulling trains over here, they have sequentially evolved on a common rail. The original standard of basically the broad gauge, meter gauge, narrow gauge rails have not changed, but the type of engines that run, the types of trains that run on them have evolved significantly, right? Which started off with a steam engine, turned to diesel engine, then it electric, and now we have superconducting magnets that are powering, maglevs and other bullet trains, etc. Right? So so you can think of digital rails, DPIs as a set of digital rails, an infrastructure that is provided for anybody's use, right? Any sort of technology, any sort of application can be built using these digital, by plugging into these digital infrastructures and actually, using the assets and using the technologies that have been provided to build various components, right? So similarly, so to support DPIs and other digital initiatives within the government, it is essential that some open source reusable DPGs are also made available, right? These DPIs, it's not necessary for DPIs to always be built on DPGs. It's a very important thing to understand, right? DPIs can be proprietary. DPIs can also be provided by some proprietary functioning department of the government, and you can always use that, right? Important example would be UPI. Right, UPI is not technically open source, right, but it is provided as a digital public infrastructure for anybody who wants to facilitate payments, who wants to turn their application into a payment application. However, for DPIs to evolve, to make sure that their DPIs can thrive and public innovation can also thrive, it is very important for DPGs, right, to also be provided. There is a set of reusable open source DPGs are also made available. By leveraging these DPGs, adopters can significantly reduce the time to market, right? Rather than building anything by everything from scratch and everything from bottom up. By leveraging DPGs, these adopters can actually reduce the time, and also while retaining their sovereignty, their openness, right? In the market. And interestingly, given the massive digitization across sectors today, there is no better time today than today to build and contribute to open source DPGs, right? And in short, like Beckn protocol, it's a project that I work in, is a great example of an open source DPG that is sort of reshaping the world of discovery and commerce, right? And interesting thing about DPGs, it is generally preferred for DPGs to do one tiny thing, but one tiny thing at scale, right? So that all of these DPGs can come together as building blocks and build a larger infrastructure. So so I think Beckn is one such DPG that can be layered on any other DPG like Sunbird or Mosaic or Atlas or any other DPGs that are out there to allow discovery and transactions to commerce, right, between platforms, right? And it is essential that open source communities work to democratize such technologies and create a reasonable level playing field for businesses in all sectors. Okay. So this is just a general summary of why how DPGs are currently being leveraged by DPIs. Okay. And it's also an important place to understand the difference between DPGs and DPIs. DPGs are mostly open source products, open source components that are built for the larger public good. And DPIs are the instantiation of these various DPGs, right? And one footnote is obviously not all DPIs use DPGs, but DPGs generally contribute to most, generally large DPIs, etc. I mean, if it is not for public good, if it is not for large scale, population scale public good, it's generally not classified as a DPG, right? So so I guess I will, in this session, I will also talk about why today is one of the best times to be contributing to DPGs. So that's sort of going to come in the end. So okay. Now, as you know that society now, all of us are pretty much going digital everywhere, especially India is one of the fastest growing digital societies, which means it will mean significant reimagining. And being India is being a land of like a billion and a half people, close to 1.5 billion people. It will mean significant reimagining of how ownership, control, accessibility, affordability of tech in general. Because I think something which I have learned over the last few years is that the way we use tech in Bangalore is very, very different from the way tech is being used in tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? I mean, I had the opportunity to meet someone who actually thought Facebook was the internet, right? I asked him whether he had data on his phone because I was not getting a signal. I said, can you share your hotspot and everything? And he was like, sir, mere paas data nahi, I only have Facebook. I was like, I mean, that is the level of user. People actually think of Facebook as the gateway to the overall internet, right? He does his entire business, his entire daily transaction, messaging, calling, everything happens through that, right? So I think the way, if you really want to approach digital, public infrastructures, and you want to make sure that it contributes to a large population set, we have to fundamentally reimagine the way we think about, digital public infrastructures. And in the last 2 decades or so, open source has proven to be a very great leveler of this building. Open source building blocks, open source digital public goods has proved to become a great contributor to digital public goods, where people who have local context can actually reuse those DPGs and build something which is more relevant and more inclusive towards the local population, and yet be able to harness the larger digital public infrastructures for their own benefit, right? So I think when it comes to governments and when it comes to large scale population scale infrastructure, it's very necessary to address openness, vendor neutrality, cost, sustainability, social good, etc. Right? So that's what we are going to talk about today. So first, we are going to start off with, what is digital public goods and why the world needs digital public goods, right? So I think one of the official definitions of digital public goods, according to Digital Public Goods Alliance, is basically they are open source software, open data, open AI systems, open standards, or any open content collections that generally adhere to local laws of the land and best practices, do no harm, and help attain SDGs, right? This is based on the UN DP sort of, SDGs, and is based on the official definition of the digital public good by Digital Public Alliance. From what I have learned is that I don't think there is any particular, formal definition of digital public goods, but think of it more like open source stuff that can contribute to large scale impact, that can actually create large scale impact, positive impact, right? So it could, and it is not necessarily software. Okay, one important thing to know is it's not necessarily software. Open DPGs can be as simple as content, right? And I will give you certain examples of what open source digital public goods can be, right? For example, software. Software, everybody knows, is the most common form of all DPGs that we talk about. But for example, Sunbird, right? Sunbird RC is a great example of an open source DPG to rapidly build, deploy, registries and verifiable credentials, right? Open data, for example, ADS is a Philippines-based DPG to sort of improve public health response, right, against certain kinds of diseases, right? So there is a data set that is continuously uploaded and given freely to the public, which the public can use. You can use that data to create your own, prediction, disease prediction systems or tracking or, pandemic responses, etc. Then content, right? Physical, written, text, literature content can also be treated as DPGs. For example, our Creative Commons licenses. All your Mozilla license, Apache license, MIT license, Creative Commons license, all of these are free to use digital content that, when included inside various, software repositories, give you access, sort of, legal ownership or legal rights to the creator, right, of that's a particular software. AI systems, right? AI systems which actually contribute, like for example, Bhashan, right? It allows you to, translate various, languages, Indian languages, natural languages via AI. Then standards.
Progress.
Right? Sorry. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I said there was some feedback. Okay. So yeah, standards. So open standards also come under DPGs. For example, Beckn protocol, one of the best examples of open standards, is basically it's a set of specs. It basically tells you how to design your systems, how to develop your systems, so that you are part of a larger network. So that, if you design some your particular system as per the Beckn protocol specification, you can potentially buy and sell any product or service from any other platform that is also implemented. So there are 5 general categories of DPGs, right? Software, data, content, AI system, and standards, right? There could be many other categories as well, but this is what I could find and I have generally encountered over the last few years. Okay, so let's look at Now, why do we need DPGs? I think we have already talked about it, but let's look at the world. What if there were no digital public goods, right? So I think it's pretty obvious, right? Think about, what if there was no Linux today, or what if there was no Android today, or what if there was no UPI today, right? Suddenly, I mean, it's been a while since we've using UPI, but suddenly if you think of, the let's look at MOSIP. Actually, that's a good idea, because MOSIP is an open source identity platform that enabled the construction of the Aadhaar platform, right, today. Now, what would happen if MOSIP wasn't there, right? Every country would have created their own identity system, right? Every country would have created their own set of, policies and rules and frameworks and everything. Basically, frameworks, I would say, more from software point of view. It will be very difficult for a person in India to sort of verify, get his identity verified in a different country, because probably their systems don't recognize our ID. But if it was on a common framework, on a common sort of built on a common DPG, all of that headache would have gone away. But a little bit more about deeper implications of a world without DPGs is, one is creating an increased digital divide. Why? Because the absence of DPGs, firstly, would sort of limit access to essential resources, right? Could be things like educational materials, healthcare information, government services. All of those services would actually be restricted to only those who can afford these private proprietary sort of solutions, right? If there were no DPGs, innovation would be limited or stifled or concentrated, right, on the concentrated towards very few set of businesses who can actually have the capital and the organization to actually innovate, right? And it's not that there won't be any innovation, but the whole burden of innovation falls on that one, right? It is not physically possible to sort of for one organization to innovate for everyone, right? So the pace of technological advancement would slow down, as individuals and organizations would face a lot of barriers in accessing and building upon existing solutions, right? And another thing is, lack of collaboration between this knowledge sharing would actually stifle creativity, hinder the development of new technologies, right? And solutions to address, and any other sort of solutions to address global challenges, right? As I said, imagine a world without Android or Linux, right? What would have happened, right? Everybody would have created their own product, and we have seen that work, right? Every different mobile phone operator like Samsung or Nokia had their own operating system, and each one of them had to build their own specific messenger apps, and or their social media applications, or any sort of applications which is constrained to that ecosystem. But the moment Android came up, right, automatically the whole need for maintaining a separate operating system for each device suddenly went out, right? And people could focus on building more applications, building more experiences, rather than actually trying to even make sure that I'm also compatible with the operating system, right? Now the world has sort of converged towards one or two operating systems. That's the whole point over here, right? Because of open source contributions, open source development, open source software used as DPGs, suddenly there is an entire explosion of innovation, right? So third thing would be higher costs, right? Without DPGs, organization government would have to develop or purchase sort of proprietary solutions, build them from scratch. This would lead to duplicate work a lot, right? Every platform, every organization would have to actually do the same thing again and again, right? And every entity would have to independently invest in the research and development and maintenance of these researches, right? And then one important thing is about decreased transparency and trust, right? DPGs, such as open source software, promote this transparency, accountability, and trust. But if there were no DPGs, there is a risk of the service owner or the product owner to sort of, I would say, exploit the vulnerabilities, or exploit the need or the resources that are essential resources, need for essential resources for the larger population, right? And in the absence of public good, proprietary software and closed systems would actually dominate, right? Limiting the ability to independently verify security or integrity of digital tools, right? This can lead to things like privacy concerns, data breaches, and ultimately erosion of trust right, in digital systems. And then one other thing is also, without DPGs, there would be limited freedom of expression, right? Let me explain how. Like, if let's say a particular digital asset or a digital public infrastructure was completely controlled by the government, right? It was very difficult to, I mean, it would actually make that corporation or the government, it will make it very easy for them to exert greater control, right, over the users of that, right? I can do whatever I want. I can change your data. I can change your visibility. I can do whatever I want behind the scenes, and you would never come to know about that, right? To say, for example, let's say the source code of let's say COVID, right? Let's take a real example. Now the COVID source code is open, right? And the fact that it is open allows for the larger public, the larger developers, the developer community to audit the source code and actually keep fixing any malicious, bugs or any sort of, maybe it could not be, it's not always intentional, but maybe security flaws and vulnerabilities can actually be fixed by larger concerns rather than actually depending upon whoever is maintaining the COVID database at that time, at that particular time, right? And then the last thing is fragmented standards and interoperability, right? And DPGs often promote open standards and interoperability, right? And without a common standard, what will happen is every platform will have to do a one-to-one integration with every other platform, because each of their APIs and each of their endpoints will be sort of proprietary, and then I'd have to actually sign one-to-one contracts. Every time I need a update, I would actually need to talk to the other platform to make that update and everything, right? It's also sort of a massive engineering overhead, right? When the standards are all over the place. So that's where GPGs are required, right? So so that's the world without DPGs. Okay. Now what happens if there is a world with DPGs, right? So it's basically the opposite of whatever we saw, right? There is increased access, right, and inclusion, right? It basically helps bridge the digital divide, promotes inclusivity by making essential resources, like like payments or identity, etc., available to those who are otherwise might be excluded, right? Second thing was sustainable development. By leveraging DPG technology, public goods, it can enhance education, healthcare, agriculture, governance, and a lot other sectors, right? And it can also promote large-scale collaboration and innovation. Today, a developer sitting in Ukraine can probably contribute to a bug, or sorry, can fix a bug that has been raised, that's present in Sunbird, right, or something really, built in India, right? So it allows for the whole world to have access to such, technologies, and also improve upon it, contribute to it, right? Obviously there is going to be accelerated innovation because there are multiple eyes looking at it from multiple backgrounds and multiple points of views. Obviously the acceleration in innovation is sort of, it's pretty obvious, right? I think the remaining 2 points are sort of irrelevant. I think that just is a copy paste error. But I also want to look at just probably spend a few minutes on how Beckn is a DPG, right? Beckn is sort of, it's an open source specification, right, that allows for any two platforms to sort of execute buying and selling transactions with each other, right? And when implemented by multiple platforms, it basically creates a network, right? And Beckn is also an example of an open source DPG. It's purely specifications. It has got no runtime. It's free to use. It's community owned, and it's completely technology agnostic, right? So basically it allows for platforms to start talking to each other by way of a network, right? So it sort of reimagines the way how consumers and providers interact with each other. But I'm not going to talk too much about Beckn today. It's more about how what I have learned from Beckn as a DPG over here. So just to give you a flavor, the Beckn protocol has today been adopted in multiple sectors, right? As I had mentioned earlier today. So it sort of started off with the Kochi Open Mobility Network, right? And that took almost a year to set it up, right? To build all the open source components and, convince the larger community to adopt Beckon and, get them implemented. And finally, around in 2020, end of 2021, early 2022, the Open Kochi initiative was set up and launched. And that was the first open network that was built on Beckon, right? So that took a year. Now, in the next 1 year, two networks popped up, right? One was ONDC and one was the Unified Health Interface, right? Both of them also on Beckon protocol. But if you notice, the number of networks just doubled, right? It was a setup, right? And then the next year, 2022 and 2023, around that year, 4 new networks came up, right? The Unified Energy Interface, Namma Yatri, which is doing around 40,000-50,000 rides a day today. And then there are 2 new networks that are currently coming up, right? It should be live by end of 2023. One is the skills and jobs and education network. And there is also an interesting network for IoT, which is also happening in outside India, called Industry 4.0. It's happening in Germany. But if you notice that the rate at which the networks are being set up has doubled every year, right? How did we do this, right? The answer is very simple: through DPGs, right? The community came together and contributed, okay, to DPGs by building frameworks, by building softwares, by building libraries, by building components, and entire applications came together and actually created this entire library of building blocks, right, that we used and reused to actually build networks faster, right? And to we will go through some of the DPGs that have been built by the community members over here. But that brings me to the most important topic today, right? Why contribute to DPGs now? Why is today? Why it was not 5 days, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, right? So I think some of the benefits of DPGs, especially, and I'll be talking more from a developer point of view, given that this is a tech community. One of the reasons why we need to contribute to DPGs is, firstly, by contributing to DPGs, you have an opportunity to have a positive impact on society. I think it's more from a personal fulfillment point of view. It's you are giving back to the community. For example, we as developers frequently use React or Node.js or any sort of these common open source tools, right? But somebody, right, thought about it. Somebody had a vision to create a larger framework that allows anybody to innovate, build any sort of UI, any sort of API system, on their platforms. And it's sort of also like a personal responsibility to give back, right? We are freely using the efforts of hundreds or thousands of developers, right, who have spent time in contributing to open source software. I think it's important to give back to the community, right? So it's not just about personal fulfillment. It's also, I feel, this is more of my personal opinion, but this is a responsibility for developers to also give back to the community for the products that we generally even take for granted, right? So yes, but otherwise, your work can generally help build the digital divide, improve access to education and healthcare. You are enhancing government systems, addressing environmental challenges, and many more things, right? And whatever you guys are contributing is going to come back, right, tenfold, because it's not just you. There are hundreds of thousands of other developers who are also working with you towards contributing the same thing, and the collective output of those 100,000 will be accessible to you as a benefit, right? So there is benefit, there is real tangible benefits from contributing to DPGs, right? Second, obviously, collaboration and networking. You as developers will actually collaborate with a diverse community of developers that are they're probably not here, but probably in another country, and researchers, contributors, etc. It provides these opportunities to you to learn from others, share your knowledge, expand your professional network, and engaging with like-minded individuals who are passionate about similar causes can actually lead to new partnerships, job opportunities, and ultimately personal growth as well. And there is the obvious skill development and learning opportunities. The more you contribute to large scale, DPGs, sort of also gives you an idea about how to think at scale, how the mental model works, etc., and also provides various learning opportunities, right? And then yes, there is also the obvious benefit of recognition, visibility, right? The more you, like, for example, if you, let's say, in backend, right, the more you contribute towards backend, the more opportunities you can get in places like ONDC and UHI. They are all frequently looking for people who are skilled in in backend and other DPIs and DPG technologies, right? So every time there's a new use case in their ONDC, the entire consultants at ONDC don't have to sort of learn the whole thing themselves, right? These are potential job opportunities and potential income sources for consultants and for students who are contributing to DPGs, right? I think that's one. And then there is obviously feedback, right? When you contribute to DPGs, you often receive feedback from other developers and users who are actively using or testing your contribution. So that sort of promotes a lot more awareness. For example, maybe we in India, we might not give privacy that much, I would say, credit. I would not say not credit, but we don't really think too much about privacy, right? That's something I think I had heard earlier from someone that in India, like we keep talking about privacy, but for a free pizza, we end up giving our name, phone number, father's name, mother's name, everything, right? So, but the same thing, if you are probably designing a system that captures private, and a developer in Europe might come and say, no, this is not this is not allowed as per our GDPR regulations, right? So you need to design your system in a different way. So that sort of suddenly increases that the awareness, a global awareness of you saying that, okay, I'm not designing just for me, but I'm just designing for the whole globe, right? So this feedback and improvement from a larger community of developers greatly improves your overall credibility, awareness, and your entire knowledge base, and helps you and lets you sort of graduate from your respective institutions as a more experienced individual, right? And the last point is more of a recent event that is happening, that is this wave that is going on. VCs, venture capitalists, right, are now having a very, very hard look at taking a sort of a very hard look at the large, the whole platform revolution, and how it has skewed the overall market value, and how with fake valuations and everything. And now the entire VC community is also looking at investing in DPG related initiatives, right? DPI related initiatives and DPG related initiatives. So I think this is a very good point to actually contribute DPGs and actually end up creating various components that become part of larger DPIs, because the VC community is extremely interested, right? I mean, for obvious reasons I can't mention all the names, but multiple VCs and VC firms, or not just angel investors, but also pre-seed firms and larger firms are now taking they are extremely interested in investing in DPI efforts and DPG efforts, right? Which means there is potential opportunity for new companies, new partnerships to be formed. And I think it is important for you students to also have this awareness about the recent change in the way VCs are looking, because they are pretty much done with investing in 10 companies and ultimately one company turning out big and recovering their money. It's given this the latest financial crisis and and the latest turbulence that is happening in the overall global economy. It's important for also to diversify your sort of investments, right? Saying that instead of investing in 10 companies that give me that out of and which might give me 10%, I'll invest in 100 companies, right, which might give me 1%, right? So I think DPG and DPG related projects are now being very seriously considered by venture capitalists to actually invest as well. And this is where I would also want to say that contributing to DPGs is not just about personal fulfillment. There is real economic value. There is real personal economic incentives right, that are also linked to DPGs, right? We should also motivate a lot of developers to contribute towards DPGs, because the whole world is shifting its view, right, about around DPGs, right? So I think it's a good, very, very good time to start taking a hard look at DPGs and start thinking scale and start thinking DPIs, right? So I think that's what I wanted to generally talk about. And these are some DPGs that have been built by members of the Beckn Open Collective. Some of them are platforms, some of them are network infrastructure, some of them are other building blocks. There are a lot actually. I mean, I couldn't put all of them together today, but there have been a lot of softwares and frameworks that have been built by the community members of Beckn, right? Most of them being applications, but a lot of other building blocks have also now started coming in. We have sort of things like protocol servers, experience centers, algorithms like strip stitching algorithms, some basics testing sandboxes, and even entire development frameworks, API development frameworks like Succinct, right? I think they have been vitally used in a lot of our current applications, and they are currently even live in various initiatives like ONDC and UHI, etc. So yes, ideally, I think this is just to give you a general idea of where all in Beckn you guys can contribute, but I wouldn't want to just limit this to Beckn, but please think DPGs from a larger a lens over here. And it's not just about Beckn, it's also about, because this is the only thing I had today, but please also look at other identities like other DPGs like Sunbird and Bhashini and other AI enabled, and even and for those people who are also interested, start looking at data and even content, right? Content DPGs that I talk about, right? There are lots of interesting things that are there out there to contribute as digital public goods, and hopefully I think your contributions will one day lead to large scale impact. And yes, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. And I think I'm a little over time, but I would want to leave the floor open for any other questions if you might may have.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Ravi, for providing this perspective. I think it was really insightful to sort of understand, the way you put the DPGs on that. You always use the word railroad, but the fact that the train is also evolving on the same railroad, and the way you sort of lay down how DPGs are important right now was really very clear and very comprehensible. And I think thank you so much for putting this together. Would love everybody to ask questions, and just as we start, just one piece I'm really curious about, Ravi, which is, like when you deploy the Beckn protocol, right? Like, just given your experience that you had now with ONDC, Namma Yatri, would be great if you could just very briefly just tell us that what is even when like Namma Yatri came up, right? It's not anything to do with the government, but it's like people coming together, right? Like that's a very interesting dimension of how DPGs will be scaled in their usage, right? Especially something like a Beckn protocol. So just wanted to understand if you can just give the everybody a perspective of like how that community can come together for such a thing, because that's also a construct which a lot of us have not been really exposed to, the government side, but Namma Yatri, Pulse Energy, what you may be doing in other places. That's a very important community angle also to this entire.
Right. So I think it's a little bit of a I would say, I don't think there is a one size fits all answer to this, right? Each of these communities were built using different structures, but I think there is one thing that was common across all of these communities was what we call as a community champion, right? There is this one person or one organization, right, or one small group of people who said, okay, I believe in this, right, and I'm going to go ahead and implement it, right, and I will go and evangelize about this whole concept. And then generally what happens is I think when that one first person or the first set of people start taking their first steps, automatically a lot of FOMO kicks in, right? Saying that, hey, something is happening over there. So let me first tell you the story of Kochi Open Mobility Network, right? There, the first company that sort of took a chance over here was Just Pay, right? Just Pay had already sort of done a significant amount of work in development of the, I mean, they are the guys who built the BHIM app, right? They're the guy who built the UPI SDK that is currently being used today over there. So they have some, experience in this overall community contribution, community-based development. So I think they were the first people to jump into this because they had already done this before, and they are now greatly benefiting from that impact. But if you wind the clocks back further, yes, it takes a lot of guts to take a bet and say, okay, I'm going to do this, and let's see where this goes, right? So that's what JustPay did in UPI. That's what PhonePe did in terms of UPI, right? Today, PhonePe is one of the, I mean, it is the largest UPI based platform in this country, right? And it takes that one person, one couple of set of believers who say, okay, I will take that, to help facilitate that, right? There is an entire community. There's generally an organization, like for example, let's say FIDE over here, right? We are more like enablers, right? We help build the structure of the community. We help, we basically connect with people, bring them on to weekly community calls. We do heavy amount of preparation before entering into any community call, which is very important because the person who is attending these community calls is generally spending 1 hour of his day, right, just to and he has a lot of other things to do, but he's coming and joining this community call to listen to you speak, which means that when you actually really prepare for such such calls, right, I mean, the preparation generally starts from the next day of the call itself. Once the call gets over, for the next week the preparation starts, and that preparation shows, right? And that person is equally invested in it because the enabler, the larger community came together, did the hard work, and that actually shows to that other person and saying that, okay, these guys did their work and now I'm going to do that. It looks like these guys are serious about what they are doing, right? So it's I think a lot of effort comes from the original creators, right? Like it's like any other open source effort as well, right? I mean, it's not just enough for you to just build some open source software, put it out there, and hope that somebody is going to use it, right? There is a significant amount of evangelism, right, and hard work that goes into this, right? And this is something which is which is easier to do when when you are a larger community and you are all sharing a common vision. So, but what I wanted to say was that it really requires that first set of believers, right, to go and do something, take that leap, right? The younger you are, the easier is to take lots of risks over here, and it generally pays off, right? I don't think I have seen any instances where this thing didn't, such kind of efforts didn't work, right? So it really is about finding that one or two champions, right? So in mobility there was JustPay, and in Namma Yatri there was this person called Satya, right, who went and rallied, right, the entire auto driver association and said, hey, there is something that you are building, right, and something that which is open source for everybody, and you can own it. It is going to be, actually, you are the owner of that business. It's not some Uber or some company that is sitting in Silicon Valley and trying to dictate how exactly you should be running your business. This is exactly this belongs to you. You are the ones who are running the business. You need to figure out how to make it profitable and everything. And there is an entire community of people who are willing to help you, right, in achieving that goal. So I think Satya was that one person who, Satya plus JustPay obviously, was those two organizations that took the leap and went ahead, right? And similarly, I think there was a community of platforms, like, I mean, I think this is something which you would relate with, right? In DACP, right, there was a bunch of companies that came together and said, okay, let's create a network, right? Now that first 5 believers is what all it takes, right? First 3 or 4 believers, once you actually take that step and take it all the way, right, without worrying about what is going to happen, whether I mean, in the first few, probably I would say the year and a half, it looks very tough because DPIs generally scale very non-linearly, right? So I think in the first few years, it will look like, okay, it looks like I'm the one who is doing all the effort. I'm the one who is building everything. I'm the one who is maintaining everything. But I think that when that first set of adopters kick in and start finding value out of it, suddenly they also become believers, saying, oh, this really works, right? I'm really benefiting out of that. And that's when the exponential curve starts, right? So I think it's more about, it's not about marketing your software. It's about belief in a larger idea, right? DPGs work on, I would say, ideas and stories rather than always, building some software. I mean, or else there will be no difference between open source and DPGs, right? It's more about that one person understanding, oh, this is going to have a large scale impact, right? And one thing which I want to emphasize is that DPGs and DPIs are not short-term stories. Yeah, right. Here you are looking for, if you're looking for instant gratification, this is not the place, right? DPGs is not the way to go about it. You can always build any platform and get some VCs money and build something very quickly, right? But I think that is limited in scale, right? That will never scale to the level of any DPIs, right? But if DPIs, the initial work is hard, but it is worth it, right? But that will have an impact that will last, and I'm not kidding, it will last 50 to 100 years to 200 years, right? I mean, that is the scale at which DPI. Like, look at internet. Can anybody shut down the internet today? Nobody can shut down the internet today, right? Because it was not built as a small, a short-term vision. It was actually built to withstand, like, 100, 200, 300 years, right? So I think that's the bet that, generally, people should take, and that's the mental model people should be ready with, right? If you're entering this game, you're guaranteed benefits, long-term benefits, extremely large benefits. Look at PhonePe today, right? And but it is going to take time. It's not going to happen in a year, right? It's probably, in today's world, given that the rate at which innovation is expanding, and it might not take as long as the internet took, but it will definitely take longer than, any other platform or any other. So I think, because it requires an entire community to change their mental model of how they think, right? And I mean, just think about it, right? The person who has never seen a phone, right, in their life, and has always communicated through letters, right? For them to completely change their mental model and turn it into a digitally active person, it doesn't happen overnight, right? It took good 20, 30 years for us to, take our mobile phones for granted, right? But yeah, I think it in the long term, it pays off.
No, thanks so much, Ravi, for addressing that. And I think the point that you mentioned towards the end, that it's the community that, really makes a lot of this come alive. I think that's the most important fact. And I'm assuming that a lot of people who are actually part of this discussion today, who are here, would essentially be, working in organizations that will have the opportunity, or would have the, the opportunity to actually build on some of these DPGs. In fact, it's interesting that, there were 3 organizations part of this C4GT cohort. So there was Shiksha Lokam, there was, Diksha on Ministry of IT, Karmyogi at Ministry of IT. Very interesting thing happened where Shiksha Lokam had built the, reference solution for discovery of courses as part of their, work that they were doing under Beckon. And Diksha and Karmyogi had exactly that problem statement. And then now, that entire piece is going to be reused there. So I think it's a lot of these community being aware that, here is an opportunity for reuse. And also the other side being open to the fact that, instead of building it by ourselves, we can actually leverage some reference implementation. So I think the community fundamentally is I think the really important enabler of the catalyst.
Interestingly, you talk about that reusability. So we have this one principle in FIDE, right? Whenever we build anything, so we have a principle called build once, right? So whenever there is any proposal to start a new project, okay, we test that project through the build once criteria. Does it require building only once, or are we going to just build it once and then throw it away, right? Unless and until it satisfies that criteria, right? The build once policy, right? That project is not even approved, right? So I think those are some very strict design principles that, we generally follow, right? About reusability and, loose coupling, unbundling, right? All of those general design principles are applied upon any project, right? And we take a lot more time to arrive at a project scope rather than saying, okay, let's start with something and then we'll figure it out as we go along, right? It's a completely different mental model when it comes to scale. That's what I think Pramod or somebody says, that instead of building things that instead of scaling what works, right, build what works at scale.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's the sort of mental model shift that I was talking about. So that has to come right from the beginning. So even if you're building a very, very simple, probably a single function DPG, right, you have to make sure that you design it in such a way that it works for not 10 people, and not just 10 people, but it should also work for 10 billion people.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's the mindset that needs to come.
Well, this is great. In fact, somebody had asked a question in one of the previous sessions saying, what if I want to create my own DPG? And the point there was, in fact, during this next 8 weeks, hopefully everybody should be exposed to some of the design principles of building DPGs, because you can create a product and call it a DPG, but the entire idea is to internalize some of the design principles in how you're building the DPG, and that's what really is the difference.
Absolutely right. Or else there is no difference between DPG and a FOSS, right? I mean, like a FOSS is just okay. I mean, you can call anything as FOSS if you just publish it on GitHub and put an MIT license on it, right? But does that software, just as is, if you use it, can that work for 10 billion people, right? Put that to the test, right? Do you have to change anything to actually make it work for 10 billion people, or can that automatically be used for 10 billion people? Is the kind of thinking that you need to inculcate before building the DPG, not after. Basically, that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm not going to take more time, but hey, guys, any question that you have, for Ravi before we close? Would love to hear anything. Please just raise your hand and ask freely. By the way, Ravi, you'll see a lot of Venkatesh Chaturvedis in the thing. Apparently, there was some glitch. One of the organizing team members, Venkatesh, but as people logged in, a lot of names became Venkatesh, although they're all different people.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Any questions, guys? Any questions on anything that you heard or anything that you want to know specifically about?
And if you guys need to reach out anytime, I'm always available on Discord. So please do, feel free to, ping me on Discord. I know the turnaround time is a little, of an issue at my end, but I rest assured I will do whatever it takes to sort of, respond to everyone. If not me, then somebody definitely from the community will respond to your queries. So yeah, feel free to, keep asking.
So yeah, I think we have some comment here. Okay, Shivam says thank you. Great. If we have no questions, then I mean, we still have, how much time do we have? Yeah, we still have a minute and a half.
I would just like to ask, so like you worked on Beckn, right? So how did you recognize the problems around you to eventually come to a conclusion that I need to build this particular solution to this problem? Like we are what I think most of us here are in our early 20s. So
Right.
we also see problems around us, but we tend to come to the conclusion that this might not be something that scales. Like whenever I've seen something in my university, I've seen a problem. Those are very constrained problems. They're not really something that could, scale to, say, the entire Indian subcontinent. How do you recognize the problems which are like something very global and something which can eventually have a solution?
Okay, I think there are many sources. Generally, what happens is, I think if you really look at, there are two ways of approaching this. One is a top-down approach where you are looking at sustainable development goals and working down from there, right? Which is generally not a like and very great approach towards it, because it might lead you anywhere you want to. The way to approach or to identify problems, right, is to actually go very, very micro. Okay, don't look at problems. Usually what happens is whenever you look at problems, they are generally symptoms, right? If you break down, and that's something which we do here at FIDE as well, right? Any problem, which generally first we see whether that is the real problem or it is basically a symptom of a more fundamental systemic problem, right? So there is an approach that we take, what is called as the 5 why approach. Okay, you ask why 5 times. Okay, for example, let's say drivers are not earning well in the country of Gambia, right? Okay, even though there is a lot of tourists. Okay. So the first question you ask is, why are drivers not earning well, right? You basically talk to the drivers over there, and then you tend to see that, okay, probably they are not getting enough earnings because there is a 40% commission being applied on each ride, on each Uber ride or whatever, right? Now the next why you ask, why is 40% commission being applied, right? Then there might be an answer to that, saying that probably there is a Uber has to maintain a big server over there somewhere, and it cannot probably rapidly auto scale the servers. Okay, the next third you again ask, why can't it rapidly auto scale servers, right? You might get an answer. So usually by the 4th or 5th why, you sort of stumble upon the root cause of the problem, and that generally comes out to just a single problem or a single set of problems that you can individually solve, and you build a DPG to solve one of those problems, right? The problem might get broken down into like maybe 100 sub problems, but DPGs, and one of the best practices about building DPGs, you solve one problem and we solve that one problem very well. Okay, for example, Aadhaar does not do anything except tell you whether you are who the person you claim you are. Okay, you scan it, you scan a fingerprint, it says, okay, is this Akshat? Yes or no? That's all. 1 or 2 APIs, that's all it has, right? So I think one approach would be to actually follow the 5 whys approach. That generally helps you identify a lot of problems that you see around you, right? So that could be, I hope that helps.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions. I think given the growing interest in VCs and DPGs, how do you navigate the potential tension between the profit-driven mindset and the broader objective of creating meaningful social impact initiatives? I think this actually comes from real life examples. Usually VCs will only shift once they see real output, right? Now that, and given that India is a country of DPGs and DPIs, right? I think VCs have a far easier time adopting to, digital public infrastructures. And generally, if you are talking to VCs in, let's say, the US, or you can always give the examples that are already there in India, right? Where saying that, okay, instead of, investing in one app that potentially might give you $10 billion in the next 10 years, why don't you invest in 10 apps that might potentially give you $1 million? So I think the overall economics of DPGs and open networks, I think, is a larger discussion. I think there are a few people in our community that might be able to talk about this much better. I think there is there are a few VCs in our community. I can probably check if they can give a talk around this. But it's a good question. I think it's a gradual mindset change, right? It didn't happen overnight, but now, given that platforms are volatile, anybody can set up a small platform by copying something that is already built in the Silicon Valley or anywhere else and quickly get funding. But whether that is going to be that's going to create real social impact, or whether it's going to also actually scale well and everything, is something which now VCs are becoming a little nervous about, right? So I think they are more thinking towards more sustainable, more large scale, more stable infrastructures. I think that's what VCs are. How to ensure that any idea is good enough to be the next DPG? Okay, for that I would recommend a course in Udemy. It's a free course. Okay, it's called Societal Thinking. Okay, I think it's narrated by I think Shankar, no, not Shankar, sorry, Sanjay Purohit from Ekstep. It allows you to sort of look at the world through so an approach called the societal platform approach. It's basically like a design thinking approach that sort of allows you to analyze and break down large scale the societal problems and turn them into small problems, tiny problems that need to be solved. And if your creation, your software or your DPG is helping solve one of those problems, that generally is a way to identify whether it's going to be a good DPG, right? And it's not about being the next DPG. DPGs can be as many as possible. You should also think that whether the DPG is going to become part of the next DPI, right? So for example, let's look at real infrastructures like roads, right? Can a small innovation in maybe the way you manufacture tar can lead to 10,000 additional roads every month, right? That's the way you're going to be thinking about. Think about doing one thing and one thing really well. That's a good DPG, right? Don't try to build some huge platform which does a million different things. That's not a DPG. Build one thing that does whatever you want. I mean, that one function extremely well at whatever scale, at whatever throughput, without any errors, and that's a good DPG.
Thanks, Ravi. You have two more questions. I know we are above time, but if you can, we can stop at these two questions if that works for you. Another 2 minutes.
I think there's a question around Beckn. How does Beckn enhance interoperability? I think I would rather than explain that on call, I think you can probably just check out some of the videos on YouTube on Beckn protocol, and you can, if you want, we can also collaborate on Discord a little bit if you have more questions.
And there's one question, Ravi, regarding security of DPG. I think this is something that you would also commonly heard in different discussions. How do you handle security risks of DPGs? If you want to just share a little bit about that.
I would say it's a very generic question over here, how to handle security of DPGs. But I think I would probably say that avoid using personal data, right? In your DPGs, avoid using privacy, try to sort of understand what are the various privacy laws, etc. over here, in case you want to look at security from a privacy point of view. But I think security is more of a system design question. It's more of a DPI question than a DPG system. But yes, I think the idea is to also look at existing security standards, existing security certifications, and security guidelines. Whatever security principles apply to any software, or that applies to DPGs as well. I don't think there's any specific security guidelines required for DPGs. But yes, given DPGs generally contribute to DPIs, which generally utilize a lot of personal information, try to avoid using personal data, or trying to create any functionality that utilizes personal data or shares personal data over a network or anything, right? Like, for example, if you are transmitting personal data from one platform to another, rather than transmitting that personal data on the network, you transmit the handle to that personal data, right, on the network, so that the actual data transfer can happen on a different protocol, or via a consent-based mechanism, etc. So I think it's a little more complicated to probably talk about just security in general. If you have any specific use cases that you want to talk about, I think we can probably have a discussion around that.
Well, thank you so much, Ravi, for taking out the time. You are available in the community, and I think a lot of people will have follow-up questions. But thank you so much for taking out time for addressing.
One last answer to Yash's question. Yash, the answer to your question is the same Udemy course, Societal Thinking. That please go to that. It will help you really think about system design decisions when you actually look at scale, right? So yeah, I think there's no one size fits all answer to that. Sometimes monoliths can also help work better than microservices. It depends on a case-to-case basis what you want. But yes, DPGs generally as a microservice is better, because you're just performing one function. And I think it's generally recommended to use DPGs as microservices. But yeah, it's not something which is set in stone, right? So you can always use monoliths as well. Yeah, sorry, Supreet, sorry for interrupting you.
No, thank you. I didn't see that question, but thanks so much for addressing the audience. And I think some very valuable insights, especially this last one about building one thing and doing it well. I think this is a big trap that we sort of fall into, which is of building everything. We want to add one thing and the other, and that neatness and the cleanness of like that one API, that is actually providing value gets missed. So great. This is an amazing session. Thank you so much. This is a great start, and I'm sure that during the next 2 months, we'll have different points of different points where we'll touch base with you, and then anything that you come across, Ravi, that you feel that the community can benefit from, please do keep sharing. You're part of our Discord community, and anything that you feel, the course is something that everybody is also taken a note of, but anything else that you feel that the community can benefit from, please do keep sharing. And then thank you so much for participating and being part of this larger C4GT community as a super mentor.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Supreet. Happy to be here. Happy to be talking with you guys.
All right, thank you so much, Ravi. And by the way, we also heard that we've been in touch with Dheeraj that a lot of Beckn projects are now also being added as part of the C4GT community program.
Yeah.
So really excited because a lot of people who didn't get through can now work on those projects going forward.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think there are a lot more projects that I intend to add. I hope that's okay. So I think, no, yeah, I think we have around 89 to 90 repositories on Beckn, I think, so I've not added everything. So I think there's a lot of issues that I will be putting out. And I think we are looking at some very big, like real issues that are coming from our projects that are going on in different countries. So I think that we can definitely, I will look towards the community for any contribution.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ravi. Thank you so much.
All right. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.